right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to our 2020 East Region Ski and Snowboard Volunteer Training. Here we just wanted to go over some basic details of what to expect, give everyone a little bit better idea, make sure that this weekend's nice and smooth, and here to answer any questions that you might have. Here from the Special Olympics Washington side of things, we have Grant Opland and Riley Stockton, and I'm going to hand it over to Grant to kind of take us through some things.
Thank you very much, Alex, and I'd like to echo what Alex has said. Welcome to the volunteer webinar, and we are really excited to be able to have a great competition this Sunday up at Mount Spokane. And a part of making that happen is you as volunteers. Could not do this without your help. And so hopefully tonight will help you be better prepared as you get ready for a great day on Sunday. Hopefully, those of you who can see the screen, some of you might not be able to if you've called in via phone, but if you have signed up to help set up the venue, we're asking for you to show up about 6:30 a.m. on Sunday to get us moved in and everything set up. And then the remaining volunteers come in about 7:30. It's 7:30 at the command center, which we will tell you exactly where that is in just a moment. So 6:30 for setup volunteers, 7:30 for other volunteers arriving at Mount Spokane. At about 7:45 to 8:30 is when all of our teams come in for check-in, and they will get their they'll have their packets, but they'll get everything set up. They'll do some warm-ups on the bunny hill. And then at 8:30 is our target startup time for our competition to begin. We might actually start a tad early if our hill volunteers are in position in our courses and our athletes, our participants are ready to go. But the official start is 8:30 a.m. and we're scheduled to run till about 3 o'clock p.m. in the afternoon. We will have lunches available for distribution. The lodge is actually preparing those for us, and they will be ready approximately 11 o'clock, and we'll be distributing them during the course between 11 and 2 o'clock, right in that window of time for lunches. And then our award ceremony in Lodge 2, approximately 12 o'clock, approximately noon till 3:30. That can vary just a little bit because of when the results and the completion of our races are done. Okay, Alex, let's move on to if we could, the next slide. This is our venue map. I don't know how many of you have actually been up to Mount Spokane and been able to even use the mountain. But if not, we do have a map here that kind of explains where things are, the runs and so on. I will mention this. If you're not familiar with Mount Spokane's ski and snowboard park, when you go up and you see the first lodge on the left, that's Lodge 1. It's very confusing sometimes for some who have not been up there. Go past Lodge 1. That isn't the main lodge. The main lodge is what they call Lodge 2, and that's further down the road. And so don't stop at Lodge 1 thinking you've arrived. Move on down to Lodge 2, and that's where everything basically takes place anyway. And that's where you'll check in. We'll have some signs there, and you'll head for what we call our command center, and that will be located in Lodge 2. And hopefully, we'll have our venue signs up, and it'll make sense to you of where to go. But the command center is where you will check in, volunteer check-in at Lodge 2. Next slide, please. There's a map here, and by the way, if you need directions and so on, you can reach out to me, and we'll give you that email address here before we close tonight. But gopland@soa.org. That's gopland@soa.org. If you have any follow-up questions, but the mountain is there's only one road up there. We have a map here that tells you just how to get to the mountain, to take the Mount Spokane Road and head on up to the park. Next, please. There's some directions, some written directions for you, and hopefully you'll have those. Again, if not, let us know and we'll get those directions to you. It's approximately, I don't know, about 30 minutes or so from Spokane. Typically, I believe you can get up to the top of the mountain within about 30 minutes. Okay. For parking, we will obviously have parking on site. We do ask that you park towards the back of the parking lot up there at Lodge 2. Keep in mind that the mountain is available even during our competition for the general public. It's open to the public. There will be other family and friends coming up who are going to be directly related with the competition with Special Olympics and also the public. So if you could just kind of park off to the fringe, kind of the fringes of the parking lot. We do ask that you keep tabs on the weather report. What it looks like right now is that it's going to be fairly warm and there's going to be moisture. We don't know if that rain will come in the morning and stick around. There more than likely will be some rain on the mountain. And so just be aware of that as you travel up the mountain. Typically, they keep the roads pretty good, and front wheel drive is fine. You don't necessarily need your four wheel drive. In the way the weather looks, it should be just fine as far as getting up the mountain with your car. And then what we've mentioned, once you have parked, just follow the signs for volunteer check-in, again at Lodge 2. Moving along, just a few things that we have thought about that you might want to consider to bring with you is if you are what we call a hill volunteer. We basically have two groups of volunteers. We call them our hill volunteers on the courses and our base volunteers. And those base volunteers are basically in the lodges. They're down the bottom of the mountain. But those of you who will be on the mountain, we're asking that you bring your own ski and snowboard equipment with you. You can rent, but we would suggest if you're able to rent before you arrive on that morning, it might be best if you are a hill volunteer. Typically, if you have volunteered to be on the hill, you probably already have your equipment. Most of you probably do. We do advise you, just like you probably already know, to bring extra layers of clothing. And then that way you can peel off if you need to. I would suggest that you do prepare for that wet weather because of the forecast. And then we do ask you to bring your own snacks and drinks in case you get hungry during your shift or if you have dietary restrictions. We are going to do our best to provide a sack lunch for you. That's our intent. But if you are on the hill especially, you might like to have something next to you because those shifts can be a little lengthy at times. You're up on the hill, and whether or not we can get that sack lunch to you as quick as we would like or distribution of that sort, it wouldn't be a bad idea to just to have something there along with you in your pockets or in a little small cooler or whatever if you're up on the hill. Okay, next. What to wear? Again, assuming that most of you probably are aware of or have been around these kind of conditions on the mountain. Just dress for the elements, lots of layers. And the hill volunteers, you could be at your post for much of the day. And that, quite honestly, could be 5 to 6 hours. So if you would like to bring anything you can think of that's portable and helps you be comfortable, from what you wear to sitting down, standing on something that's a little more comfortable for you. We will have some umbrellas. We are going to provide some umbrellas. We might be somewhat limited to those. So if you have an umbrella, you might like to bring that with you. And as what's quite obvious, you've got your snow pants, waterproof jackets, and so on. And so, again, I think it appears that you're probably going to be preparing mostly for moisture. We're not anticipating cold weather as much as it is cooler, but it's the moisture, and so you'll want to be prepared for that. Next, The weather report, as we mentioned, at this point, it is showing in the, well, I know down below here in the Spokane area, when we're talking mid 40s and moisture. And the winds, that's one thing up there in Mount Spokane that can really be a difference maker. Is I know last year we had quite a bit of wind. It blew one of our warming tents away, and it's known to have some wind gusts. And so just be prepared for those kinds of conditions, not just while you're up there, but even driving up the mountain. Keep tabs on the weather report. Volunteer lunches. We are, like I had mentioned, looking to provide a sack lunch for you. But as we talked about before, you might want to bring something else up with you for dietary restrictions, or even just to make sure you're getting some nutrition. If we have a little trouble moving some lunches around or getting to you when we should. So just keep that in mind. I would, some granola bars, perhaps some bottled water, things like that you can carry with you. Next, please. We are looking for those who are on the hill. If you do not already have a season pass, some of you do, because you've been at Mount Spokane and you like to go up there on a regular basis. You may have a season pass. If you don't, need that lift ticket. The intermediate, we have 3 different levels of racers. We have novice, intermediate, and advanced. The intermediate racers actually are going to be sent down in what we call intervals. And so once the course starter clears the course with a safety monitor, that next participant is going to head down. We're not going to wait until that participant is at the end or at the bottom, at the finish line, before the next person goes. That typically, intermediate, is our largest group of racers, and so we have to keep things rolling. And one way we're going to try and do that is to send them down in intervals. I'd like to mention that the novice and the intermediate racers are running through Lodge 2, and the advanced racers will be running through Lodge 1. And so we'll have a group of our volunteers, a smaller group, but some will be at Lodge 1, and then the others will be at Lodge, based out of Lodge 2. The order of events for anyone who is interested: we're doing a giant slalom run. There's 2 runs for that. And a super G slalom, there's 1 run. And the downhill slalom, there's 2 runs. Our intent is to make sure our participants were able to get all of those runs in, and that's why your help is critical. And the timing of the sequence of how we run these things is really important. And so we have tried our best to make sure that everything is explained. And once you get to command, we will assign different volunteers to their positions. Our chief of course on each course will be orienting you to what you need to do and give you the kind of tools and things that you need to be successful. Next, and I think that's my part of things. I think, Alex, we're turning it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. All right, everyone. So we just wanted to go through general volunteer roles and a little bit more information about what to expect in that area of things. Like Grant mentioned, we've got a great group of course marshals who are going to be running volunteers through a little bit. Our chief of courses are going to be running our volunteers through a brief little training once they arrive, and kind of huddle you up and get you in sync all the way down the line. One thing to note is just be aware that your position may be moved based on biggest need. So maybe you signed up as a starter and we really have a need for timers. Just be aware that we might move you around a little bit based on our biggest need. But just wanted to run you guys through some of the roles, and as you start seeing these titles, kind of having an idea what they mean. So our course greeter, what that role is going to entail is greeting and organize athletes for the course start. Our chief of course, like I mentioned, they're going to be the ones managing the athlete check-in and course, as well as communicating with the command center. Our starters, your role here is confirming athlete numbers to timers and confirming that the course is clear with the safety monitor. The starter here is going to call for the start of the race for each participant. And then our safety monitors, you guys have a really important role of alerting the starter of any fallen skiers and then confirming that the course is clear for the next participant in the race. Like we said, safety is a huge priority, so we want to make sure that everything is good to go before we send the next wave down the mountain. Uh, Continuing with our on-mountain volunteer roles, we have gate judges. Your role here is to monitor the course gates, working to manage disqualifications on the course. Timers, again, you're monitoring those disqualifications, but your main job here is to time participants and then communicate the time to the recorder so we can make sure we get that to the command center and get that process going. A recorder, you're recording the race times on different heat sheets. Your command center runner, you're the one who's going to be relaying completed race times to the command center to process results. This is a big role here. The sooner we get those results processed, the sooner we're able to continue down the chain of events and head on to awards at the end of the day. Our course setup volunteers, you guys are preparing the course and resetting in between runs, making sure everything's clean and clear for the new event. Of course, we still have our on-base volunteer roles for those of you who are not heading up the mountain. Our setup role, this involves a lot of putting up merchandise, placing signage out, and helping to set up awards. There's always a lot of stuff going on at the base of the mountain that we need help with. Our warming station volunteers, you guys are going to be preparing and distributing snacks and hot drinks to our athletes as they come through, have a break between their runs. And then our awards volunteers, you guys are going to be preparing and pulling awards as the results come in, helping with the presentation of that. There's a lot going on at the base of the mountain, so definitely appreciate all the help that we have down there. All right, just really quickly, wanted to run you guys through some basic details of interacting with Special Olympics athletes. I know a lot of you have volunteered with us in the past before, but if this is your first time, we wanted to walk you through a few basic details. So the main thing to talk about is what exactly is an intellectual disability. So intellectual disability is a term used to describe a person with certain limitation in cognitive functioning and other skills. These limitations can cause a child to develop slower and learn differently. The three main types that we have here at Special Olympics Washington and in general with intellectual disability are Down syndrome, autism, and Fragile X syndrome. So some challenges to inclusion that we see. Here at Special Olympics Washington, we want to promote inclusion, but of course there's always a variety of ways that it can be limited. So the four main challenges to inclusion that we see and that you should be aware of, the first one is hero worship. And that's really just that aspect of assuming that people are special for overcoming a disability. The pity aspect, feeling sorry for someone with a disability. It leads to patronizing attitudes. The spread effect, assuming that the disability negatively affects other aspects of a person. And of course, stereotyping, making generalizations about people with similar disabilities. So people first language. So this is something that we teach here at Special Olympics Washington as a way to represent a more respectful, accurate way of communicating. Of course, the biggest thing here is people with disabilities are not their diagnoses or disabilities. They're people first. So instead of saying he's autistic, say he has autism. Instead of saying she's Downs, say she has Down syndrome. Always put the athlete first and remember to follow the athlete's lead and how they identify themselves. Dignity of risk. This is another important thing to think about here. The dignity of risk is the idea that coddling people with intellectual disabilities limit them. Many SOA athletes are able to live independently and are quite self-sufficient. The big thing to note, especially when it comes to ski and snowboarding, is this first aspect. So offer to help, don't assume. There's going to be falls that happen on the mountain. That's part of it, and it's part of what we expect. Don't just jump in right away when you see somebody fall. They have rules where they can get up and do what they can. So don't just assume that because they fell, you have to jump in right away. And when they do, offer to help and don't assume. Feel free to ask for clarification if you don't understand someone's speech. Oftentimes, if it's easier to write it down, that's a great idea as well. And of course, a big thing is to share your feelings if someone does or says something inappropriate. So age appropriate interactions, just a few things to keep in note here. Just make sure you're monitoring your tone. No reason to baby talk or speak louder than the norm. Eye contact. This is a big one if someone uses a translator, has a teacher, helper, guardian, whatever that person may be. It's important to address the athlete instead of looking at the translator or helper. Physical interaction, just being aware of your environment. Great interactions are a high five, fist bump, those type of things. And just introductions. It's a simple introduction. You're going to meet a lot of great athletes up on the hill who are having a ton of fun. Those of you both on the mountain and at the base, you're going to meet a ton of great athletes. So introduce yourself. You're definitely in for a fun day. Introduce yourself early and start getting to know some athletes. And remember, physical interactions can go both ways. If an athlete does something you're uncomfortable with, explain that to them. And like I mentioned, a good physical interaction is a high five. And I would definitely suggest an introduction handshake when you get the day going. Of course, our volunteer code of conduct. Just some key things to note that while serving as a volunteer, you'll provide for the general welfare, health, and safety of all athletes and volunteers, dress and act in an appropriate manner, follow the established rules and guidelines of Special Olympics, and in this case of the mountain itself, one thing to note is that upon arrival at the command center, I believe, Grant, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but volunteers will also have to sign the waiver form for Mount Spokane. Reporting any emergencies to the appropriate authorities after first taking immediate action to ensure the health and safety of all participants, abstaining from the consumption and use of all alcohol, tobacco, and illegal substances, and of course, not engaging in any inappropriate contact or relationship with athletes, volunteers, or other participants. So we do still have some needs that we could fill. I know we're getting a little close, but it never hurts to have more volunteers. So if you or anybody you know is interested in any of these on-mountain roles in specific, we need some timers, starters, and some course setups. So if you know anyone who would like to volunteer, go ahead and contact me at awriter@soa.org, and I'd be happy to get you set up. One thing to note, this isn't as much of a situation in this instance where some of the shift times might have changed, but this one has stayed pretty consistent. So like Grant mentioned at the beginning here, those setup volunteers are arriving at 6:30, and for the most part, everyone else will be there at 7:30. And like we mentioned, just be aware that we might ask you to move to an area of biggest need. Just be flexible. That's a great key and something that will really help us a lot in making sure we have a successful day. But like I said, we would still love more volunteers. So if you know any friends or family who are looking for something to do, it'd be great to have them come join us. We just want to thank you guys so much for volunteering. A couple things to note. We do have a couple emails here if you have any questions as we approach the event. Anything on the volunteer side of things, you can contact me. My name's Alex at awriter@soa.org. I'd be happy to answer any of those questions you have on the volunteer side of things. Of course, your competition questions, that can go to Grant Oplin. Grant mentioned his email there. And then Riley Stockton, who will also be coming over here from Seattle to the event, is his email right there. And then like Grant mentioned, your day of point of contact is really just the command center. Anything big is going to be going through there. That's going to help answer your questions, get you all set up and check in. And of course, we couldn't do this without our great volunteer team over there on the east side. We've got some great chief of courses who are going to be really getting you guys set up and in the right position. So we're really looking forward to it and can't wait to have you guys join us. And at this point, we wanted to open it up to any questions that you guys might have, and hopefully we can get them answered. All right, I'll unmute everybody here. All right, do we have any questions? All right. Wow. Looks like we don't have any questions. Grant, Riley, do you guys have anything else to add?
One thing that I had failed to mention as a point of interest, this is actually a qualifying event for our state competition, which will be held in Wenatchee on February 28th through March 1. And so there will be many of our athletes and unified partners that will be advancing to the state competition. And also, we currently have approximately 100 participants that will be with us on Mount Spokane, and they represent programs from Wenatchee, Tri-Cities, Walla Walla, Riverside, just north of Spokane here, and then we have a program right here in Spokane. So there's 5 different programs, about 100 participants looking to qualify for our state competition in Wenatchee. That's something I had failed to mention. I thought it might be somewhat of an interest to our volunteers.
And Alex, I'll just step in and just say, I know you mentioned it, but we just want to thank you guys for coming out. Skiing is not the easiest event for a volunteer, so we really appreciate all you guys are doing. If you have any questions, I know Alex ran through each of the roles, but as you get onto the mountain or as you get to the mountain, please don't hesitate to ask. We'd rather have you guys do it right. Feel free to ask as many questions. That's what Grant and I will be there for, is to help you guys out. So that's all I had. And just thank you again for all your guys' time.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate it. Like Riley said, it's definitely not an easy volunteer role. It's pretty easy to jump in and be a scorekeeper at basketball or softball, but we appreciate all you guys willing to come out bright and early up to the mountain and head on up there for a fun day on the hill. So it should be a lot of fun. We definitely appreciate you guys coming. Are there any more questions? Anybody with anything else to add? All right. Well, it looks like we've wrapped that up. It looks like no questions coming in. Like we said, we're happy to answer any questions through email. So go ahead and take that contact information down. And if anything comes up, go ahead and shoot us an email and we'll be happy to get back to you. And like you said, Riley and Grant from the SOA side will be on site, and we're looking forward to having you guys join us. Thanks, everybody.
See you on the mountain on Sunday.
Thanks, everybody.